If you're not aware of the story, Hatchie was hit by a train about 5 years ago, nearly died. The railway staff saved him. They couldn't save his leg, and that's where Will and Owen came along, and they took him from a rescue shelter, and he now lives with them. And it's Hatchie's got 3 legs and looks fit as a fiddle, I have to say. Will as well.
He is. He's very strong, very fast. He loves a good run around the field.
And he's been brilliant for him.
And awesome with Owen. Yeah. Very gentle.
Can you remember the first time you met him, Owen? Was it like love at first sight?
Yes. The first time when I met Hatchie is when I was in my room in bed, and Dad, when I woke up, my dad brought Hatchie in, and he laid his head on my lap, and yeah, that's how it happened.
That's how it happened, and now you're best friends, and we saw there you confide in him, you tell him things. Do you find it easier to talk to him than the grown-ups sometimes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
And how has he changed things for you? You know, when you came along, what was your life like, and how has that changed now?
He's changed my life by... I used to be scared of strangers. Now I'm more confident in going out more.
And you were diagnosed with narcolepsy last year. Tell me how this sort of affects your life. What are the symptoms you get?
So I have narcolepsy with cataplexy. The narcolepsy makes you extremely tired during the day, but it also affects nighttime. So we have really, really poor quality sleep at night, and lots of horrible, vivid dreams and things like that. But the cataplexy has been my biggest problem.
Right.
It's sudden loss of muscle tone and muscle paralysis on like sudden emotions.
So that would, if you were walking along the street, you could, in theory, just drop down.
Yeah, I got it just then.
Yeah. When you came in. Yeah.
You feel really vulnerable because it's like being locked in, because I can hear everything that's happening.
Well, this is the thing, you're fully aware the whole time that this is going on. I mean, I knew about narcolepsy, and I knew what that is with the sleeping and stuff, but with the cataplexy, it's...
I didn't know about
that. I didn't know about that, but it is literally just... You could completely fall to the floor, not be able to move, like a puppet, like you say, but you're fully aware.
Yeah, so I can hear people on the street saying, like, wake up, or ringing the ambulance.
Some people have mistook you for being drunk.
Yes, yeah. I was looking into medical assistance doc because they can sort of give you warning before you have an attack, and a lot of comfort as well during the attack, because if dogs always knew that I was still there, like they would be nudging me and looking after me.
And it's not just that. I mean, Poppy's trained now to wake you up in the morning when your alarm goes off.
Yeah,
I mean, we could all do with a puppy in the morning. Let me just say, she can stay at mine. And more importantly, look for your medicine bag as well. If anything was to happen to you, she knows where that bag is, what that bag is, and can bring it over.
Yeah, she loves looking for it as well.
But what's special about Poppy is that she hasn't trained for this since being a puppy. Poppy was a stray.
No. Yes.
She was found in Ireland and she was taken in, and then she was trained quite quickly, actually. What was her training process?
So I got her in February, and it was kind of a matchmaking process.
And they literally searched for dogs that they thought that they could train in this short space of time to do it.
And it was exhausting, because she was not great to begin with.
No, she wasn't. But she's got such a great character, and she's so clever. At the beginning, before she was working, she needed so much input that was kind of like a downside. But now she's had the foundations, she's just perfect.
So this must have made a huge difference to your life. How has your life changed?
Yeah, it's given me a bit of my independence, well, a lot of my independence back, and I feel like I have a purpose again.
Yeah.
Like, having been a nurse and having that taken away, I felt quite lost, and yeah, she's given me all of that back.
So, well, now it's not just the 2 of you, it is the 3 of you now. I mean, I know some men might get jealous, Andrew, I'm not going to lie.
Well, yeah, it's definitely made a positive, like, a really big impact for me, because I always had to pick her up before dates or when we went anywhere. We always had to plan that in. So the idea now that rather than me going to her house to pick her up, we can just meet somewhere is actually a really big difference.
Yeah.
I'm less dependent.
Yeah. And can you train any rescue dog? Because I just assumed that if you were going to put a dog through training like this, it would be something that would have to start
really early.
from puppy age.
I know, it is incredible that rescue dogs are actually so capable of this.
And is that to do with the fact that because obviously they've had a tough life, or some of them may have been abandoned, that because of that feeling of abandonment, they're much more, if somebody gives them the love and the attention, they're more loyal than ever?
Yeah, I would argue, I think a lot of people who have rescue dogs would argue that they are the most devoted and have really, really good attachments. Like, I fell in love with her straight away.
Yeah, watching the film, what's extraordinary is that you were picked up and helped. Joanne Froggatt plays the counsellor in the film that you were helped by. And you got the opportunity to move into some accommodation, which sort of seemed to be the start of your recovery. But then discovering Bob. Now, in the film, Bob breaks in and starts eating your cornflakes. In real life, you discovered him and he was injured, is that right?
He was sitting on my doorstep, yeah, and he had a big abscess on his leg. Well, it wasn't my doorstep, it was the same doorstep on the ground floor, of which I was on the 5th floor, and he'd been sitting there for 3 days on this mat, and I knocked on the door and I said, "Your cat's been out here for 3 days," and they're like, "Oh, it's not my cat." So I invited him up, and I had some some tuna and stuff, which I gave him. And while I was feeding him, I discovered the abscess on his back leg, took him to the RSPCA and spent literally the last money I'd made from busking the day before on his antibiotics, which I've had to feed him for 2 weeks. During that time, trying to find where he lived. Couldn't, and then tried to send him on his way, thinking he might know where he's going. And instead, he started following me a little more each day, until one day he actually got on the bus with me, like in that scene.
And that's the clip that we just saw. And for you, I mean, it was even bigger than this, because this was start of a friendship that you two have, and you sort of put it down to him that he saved you in a way because of the responsibility you had towards
it's like
him.
Having a child, yeah. He taught me that I had to, buckle up, and well, because he was there, he was following me around and stuff like that. I had to, take responsibility for him, and I didn't know it then, but the love that he was giving me was helping me to change my ways.
Amazing.
So days after giving birth, you noticed that there was something a little bit different about Joel, didn't you?
Yeah, Joel, he was born on the 16th, and on the 28th he had sleep apnea.
Right, gosh,
he stopped
this
breathing.
is frightening.
Yeah, he stopped breathing, and that continued all the way through until he was 2 years old. It slowed down a bit from 18 months. But yeah, he's at once to 4 times a night he would stop breathing.
And how did that develop before you got the diagnosis that you were looking for?
After that, we didn't really, to us, we didn't notice that he wasn't looking at the cameras and the photos and different things, but his speech wasn't coming along at all. He wasn't talking at all. We had our own language as far as like doing hand movements and stuff like that, didn't we? But he preferred just to be, he would pace. Wherever we were, he would find a route and he would just pace back and forth, back and forth.
Back and forth. Just let my kind of little imagination run free a bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it was at 7 that you were diagnosed with autism and ADHD, and a relief for everybody to know what it was.
Yeah, it was. A lot of people say to me, "Were you really upset?" Yes, of course we were upset inside, but actually it was a relief because we thought finally people would understand Joel. Finally would get the help that we needed. And we did, didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Years later, I got Caddy here.
Yes, this was the big turning point.
So what was life like before Caddy?
Oh, that's I just it kind of put some tears in my eyes when every time someone says that.
Right. Okay. Well, I'll ask Mum then. I'll ask Mum.
He was very much in his own little world, to where it wasn't in our world. The world scared him. It still does to a certain extent, but back then he shied away from it. He would hide. He would run. He wanted to get away. He would put his fingers right in his ears if the noise was too much. There was no emotions except for screaming and crying. There was no smiles. There was no talking. He just wasn't in our world.
So it was through this amazing organisation, Dogs for Good, and it was through them that they put you in touch with the right people that you could find an autism assistance dog. Yeah. And you hadn't heard of this either. So
it was the paediatrician that actually told us. And I was like, I hadn't heard of it, at all. And so I looked it up. And then it was the next time we went to the paediatricians again, and he said, you should look into it.
Very brilliant, these organisations that are matching the dog to the person. And from day one, when you brought Caddy home, you went straight out in the garden.
Yeah. Before I had a cat, I could never go outside. And first time we saw we saw Caddy, which was one of the preview, wasn't it?
It was. They brought Caddy out to see how Joel and the family would react to a dog and see how Joel would react to a dog. And within 20 minutes of being at our house, and unknown to us that Caddy was the dog they was thinking, but they were both outside in the back garden and Joel was throwing a ball. And he wouldn't go out. And
you saw him smile.
Well, he had like a little smile. The first smile, it was like the little corner of his mouth kind of went up, and then gradually over the next coming, like it wasn't even because I had to go in for training for 10 days because Caddy had been trained fully. He had 1 year of socialising, then 1 year of training, so he knew all the commands and I didn't. So I had to go for training for 10 days. But we lived at the time closer to Banbury then, and I was able to bring Caddy home every night. And by the time at that end of those 10 days, Joel was smiling.
When did you first notice that Bessie was behaving differently around Philippa?
I noticed about 3 or 4 days that her behaviour had changed from just being a normal dog about the house to almost a panic. The look on her face, her expression had changed, and it was a look of concern. And you could almost, looking back on it, you could see that she was trying to tell something was wrong, but you don't think.
So at
like
the
that,
time, what did you think? Like, what's the matter? Does she want to go out? Does she, you know, does she need to...
She thought there was more likely something wrong with the dog than there actually was with Philip.
Yeah. I just thought she might be going into season, or she was just getting, you know, the airs of spring, and I didn't know.
And was she fussing around Philippa, or do you think she was trying to tell you something?
Initially, she was more fussing around everywhere we went. She was tripping us over wherever Philippa was. So she was fussing more around Philippa. And then it wasn't until the Monday when she'd got really poorly that I noticed how scared she looked. You could see the whites of her eyes, and that was when I realised.
She's trying to tell you something she wants her to.
Let's bring the doctor in at this stage to sort of diagnose what we're seeing here. I mean, this is all amazing for us to hear about, but for you, what's your take on what we're hearing?
Well, you're right, it sounds almost too good to believe, doesn't it? But what we know now, after many years of these anecdotes and having investigated it with the charity, is that dogs with their incredible sense of smell, I mean, you and I can smell probably a teaspoon of sugar in a cup of tea. This little dog could smell a teaspoon of sugar in 2 Olympic swimming pools, just to give you some perspective on it. And what we now know is that cancer smells different, cancer cells divide differently, and they smell different, and dogs can detect this change. What we don't quite understand is why a dog that lives in a family might know that this is something to warn the family about, and that's really, really interesting. But what's happened here is this dog with an incredibly strong bond with his family has actually warned them about this threat, this change in odour that meant something awful was about to happen.
And was it based on Bessie's behaviour that you thought, do you know what, something is not right here? Did you take her to the vet, or did you take Philippa to the doctor?
Initially I knew she had a bit of a fever, Philippa, so I'd taken a temperature, but because the dog was behaving so weird, after I'd give Pippa some paracetamol, I would have expected the temperature to go back down, but because of her, I went and took her temperature again, noticed it was going up. It wasn't extreme, but I noticed it was going up, not down. So that was when I phoned the emergency doctors, and I told them that the dog was behaving peculiar. And the doctor phoned me back and said, bring her up.
Really?
And he'd had experience of this before, so he recognised straight away that there was something wrong.